very practical information about sport nutrition, and basically we're gonna have a look on what an athlete, a sport enthusiast should eat before, during, and after exercise. So the main goals of sport nutrition are to maintain homeostasis. So we've seen that homeostasis is the state of equilibrium in our body at every moment. So we have to counteract all the time the difference of environmental conditions like temperature, like pressure, like what we eat, like our stress level, and so on. And the idea is to, for example, to maintain our body temperature at the same level all the time, 37 degrees, because each time we overheat, it's not good, and each time our temperature goes down, it's not good. So when we do a physical exercise, it can be a training session, it can be a competition, the homeostasis is, let's say, broken for a few minutes or hours after the exercise. And during these few hours following the exercise, we have to make our body come back to the previous condition before exercise. So the goal of sport nutrition is to promote adaptation. So, for example, adapting our muscle mass to the training that is done, building mitochondria, producing neurohormones. So we all the time have to adapt to our training, to our physical exercise, to all this stress for our body. The second goal of sport nutrition is it's mostly for hard and long training sessions or competition, is to delay the moments that fatigue occurs. And I will explain later what is fatigue in sports. Of course, it's also to improve performances, so producing more power, having a body weight that is suited to the needs of the sports. So far, of course, it's completely different between playing rugby and doing gymnastics. The role of sport nutrition is to, in the end, also to promote performance. And the last two ones, it's also to avoid injuries or disease. There is a kind of prevention with sport nutrition is linked to prevention. And finally, to promote fast recovery after exercise. So there are many different goals, and nutrition is the middle of the process of training and competing and doing sports. So what is fatigue? Fatigue is a very important thing because it's in the middle of the life of an athlete, especially if you do lots of competition. But whatever the level, athletes, people have to face fatigue and to overcome fatigue during, after exercise. And we have two, in sport we have two main categories. The first one is the what is called performance fatigability. So when this performance fatigue occurs, the performances are decreasing usually. So it can be a decrease in power or speed, for example, but it can also be less efficiency in tennis or in soccer, because your brain and your cognitive system is less efficient. And the second one is perceived fatigability, which refers to the sensation of the athletes. So you can have, for example, you can have performances that are maintained. You run at the same speed, but the perception of the fatigue is different, and you're feeling more tired, and the task of running at, let's say, 12 k's per hour is perceived as more difficult. So these two categories are their evolution can be different during a competition, for example, and of course nutrition may help to deal with these phenomena. Very quickly, today, just to give you a few information about the science behind fatigue. There is a more and more important theory which is linked to the nervous system. So the phenomenon of fatigue in sports may occur as a central fatigue, so coming from the brain and all the very complex mechanism in the brain, and the transmission of information from the brain to the lower part of the body. And on the upper right side, you can see that the fatigue can also be expressed on a more peripheral level, and mostly at the connection between nervous system and muscles. So for your muscles to contract, there is a stimulus. A nervous stimulus should be sent to the muscle for him to contract, and at the junction, which is called the neuromuscular junction, in the middle of the slide, between the yellow square and the muscle on the right. So at this junction, many things may happen, and when you are very tired at the end of a run, at the end of a triathlon, or at the end of a training session, the transmission of the stimulus from the nervous system to the muscle can be impaired. So and for example, you all know that caffeine and coffee may help to delay fatigue in sports, and one of the hypotheses is that caffeine plays a role at this junction between the nerves and the muscles, and helps to transmit information more efficiently, even if we have a low glycemia, even if we are low glycogen, even if we are dehydrated or tired. As I said in the previous slide, the role of sport nutrition is also to delay that phenomenon which may occur during a competition. During training, except during hard, long or difficult training sessions, the phenomenon is less likely to occur, but during a competition, it's highly expectable that fatigue occurs before the end of the race. So the idea is to delay it after the finish line, if possible. Let's go for very practical things. So before exercise, you all know that the nutrition in the previous days is very important. And the specific goals are first to store glycogen. So the glycogen is the how we store carbohydrates in our muscles and in our liver. So having the tank full before a race, whatever the kind of race, whatever the kind of competition, is very important. Also, the second goal is to store water, either in the cells or outside the cells. Another goal is to minimize the digestive energy expenditure. So you may know that each time you have to digest something, it costs us some energy, and the harder it is to digest, the more energy we need to process the foods. And you may know that fat and proteins are probably the most difficult things to digest, especially fats. And the last two goal is to reduce bowel loading, especially for exercise like running, where there are vibration impacts, because it may cause bowel disturbances or discomfort. And last, the goal of the nutrition the last days before competition, it's also to recover from the training. And for example, when you train for several weeks, like Anne-Catherine for the Cape Town marathons, the last few days where it's called the tapering period, you have to the nutrition should help to recover from the training from the previous weeks. So how? It's quite simple. Today it is recognized that increasing carbs by 20% during the last 3 days is probably the most efficient way to build your glycogen stores. And so just eating more rice, potatoes, cereals and pasta, but not huge quantities, just 20% of your daily caloric intake. So it's few more spoons of rice or potatoes at each meal, for each meal. The second thing is to reduce fiber-rich foods, because fibers may cause bowel issues. So beans, nuts, whole grain cereals, you should reduce them for at least 3 days before competition. And last, reduce fat intake, because when you eat fat-rich food, especially if you're not trained for that, it may cost lots of energy to process all these fats. So it can.
On the second one, reducing fiber-rich food, is that for like triathletes who swim and bike for the first 2, 3, 5 hours? Is it the same, or is it just more for runners because of the motion?
No, I think the more fiber you have in your bowel, the more you are likely to have bowel disturbances, whatever the sport. But mostly for running, because running with all the impact, it creates vibrations, movements, and having lots of fibers in your bowel is not really good for that. But I guess it's for every type of.
A lot of coaches would say nuts and cereal for breakfast on the day, and then you put them both listed.
Yeah, but you can. I wrote reduce. It's difficult to skip completely, but you can reduce them and avoid very foods that are super rich with fibers, like beans, for example, or nuts.
Just a quick one before we move on. Just the second last on the specific goals. Reduce bowel loading.
Yeah.
I'm constantly told by my coach to eat less off the bike and eat more on the bike.
Yeah.
And that says I must reduce bowel loading.
Yeah.
Because I often eat more off the bike and eat less on the bike. And now that says I must reduce bowel loading, which goes against what I'm being told. Because I'm being told that I must eat more on the bike and eat less off the bike.
Yeah. It's quite difficult to answer, because I don't know what you are really eating on and off the bike. But I guess that you first, during the last few days before competition, you should not change completely your eating habits and go for overeating, for example, because you are fearing to lack energy. So sometimes athletes overeat or eat too much in the days before, especially the last dinner or the breakfast, and it creates it makes you spend lots of energy in order to process that bigger amount of food. So small meals, very easy to digest, minimize digestive process. That's probably the best thing before competition. And while you are racing or exercising, I think you should find, and we're going to discuss it, a balance between providing energy to your body and minimizing bowel process, because when you exercise, all the blood flow goes to your muscles and your skin and your brain, and not to your bowel. So if you eat too much on the bike, it will create a phenomenon that may decrease your performances and create bowel issues and so on. So there is a range of calorie intake that
So
you.
what your coach means is like you maybe, like you said, you sometimes stuff yourself before the time, eat so much, and then you go ride, and then your digestive slows down because all the blood's going to your muscles. Where if you eat smaller before and then little bits on the bike, you have more sustained energy. You don't sit with a stomach full of food that's drawn water and all this stuff. Maybe.
Yeah, that's. But in the end, you should find your own way, what is good for you, because every athlete is different. And a close friend of mine, which is a medical doctor from a professional cycling team in France, FDJ Groupama, has told me that, for example, when they are in a camp, they have 30 athletes coming back from training. They have a huge buffet at the hotel, and some of them are eating a lot, fearing to miss some energy, or because they just like or love to eat. And other ones, on the opposite, are quite anorexic and they don't eat enough, and they are probably have an impaired recovery because they eat, their caloric intake is too low. So in the end, you have to find your way, and nutrition should be individualized, because we are all different with many different parameters in the equation.
So, question, does nut butters also fall into the nuts category?
That's a very good question. I guess because it's grinded, it's slightly different, because you have probably less fibers because it's grinded. But if you eat lots of peanut butter, for example, or almond butter, you may experience the same problems. So the few examples, the last 3 days for breakfast, you may have oatmeal and a green tea. You may have rice cakes and peanut butter and black tea or coffee. For lunch, you may have eggs, pasta, vegetables, chicken, potatoes, and salad. And dinner, that's just very quick examples: fish, rice, greens. That's a few examples of meals, but you can see hamburgers. You can't see complex fats, proteins. You don't see brie or sausage, or that's not the perfect meal before a race. The other time I was asked by an athlete, do you think hamburger for the dinner before a race is the best meal? No, it's probably too fat, too rich with proteins, and too hard to digest. Go for fish and rice and vegetables, and it's going to be perfect with olive oil, and it's fine. Nutrition before exercise. So you can see, depending on for the last meal, usually it's a breakfast. Depending on the time you have between this last meal and the start of the race, you may have a different caloric or carb intake. So if it's 4 hours, your breakfast is 4 hours before the start, you may eat slightly bigger breakfast with 4 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbs. So it can be a real meal. But on the other side, if you plan to have your breakfast because you have a start which is very early in the morning, you only have 1 hour between that last meal and the start of the race. Only 1 gram per kilogram of body weight is enough. So you may have a light snack or just a small smoothie, and that would be okay. So it depends on the time you have between, and the amount of carbs should be different and should be adapted to the time you have to digest it. Does it make sense? Okay. And one thing that should be avoided, you probably have all heard about reactive hypoglycemia. So what happens when you ingest carbohydrates only 45 minutes before exercise, especially if it's high glycemic index carbohydrates? You may have, you can see the pink curve. So for example, you have a bottle of energy drink, or I don't know, Coca-Cola, or even a fruit juice, big fruit juice, and from that your blood glucose and insulin level rise very quickly. Then you reach a peak, and your body with this peak will release lots of insulin, and then it will probably go down very quickly, and you may experience a kind of, which is called reactive hypoglycemia, number 4, and your blood level goes down the level it had before breakfast, and from that your body needs to adapt and find again balance. So that's why you need something like 30, let's say 1 hour before the start between your breakfast and the start of the race. And second, you should go for more complex carbohydrates, because if you go for simple carbohydrates, high glycemic index carbohydrates, you may experience such phenomenon. And last, we will talk about that in another course, more advanced. Now we have these new devices that helps us to have continuous glucose monitoring. So at the first it was created for people with diabetes in order to check on their phone their instant blood level. But now athletes may use that technology, and I was lucky to try it for several months. So you have a patch which measures your blood glucose on a continuously, and from that you may see what happens regarding your blood level after eating each type a specific kind of food. So now we have this technology that helps us to manage our food intake regarding our physiology, because we are all different, and for the same kind of breakfast, 2 athletes may have different response in their blood glucose. It's quite early, so I would recommend to have a light last meal. For example, at 4:30.
Last.
Yeah.
Last.
5. Last 5. And have I don't know, a banana and a coffee, or a small oatmeal. But at least have 1 hour before racing. And if the race is not too long, I would recommend to wake up later and have just 15 minutes before the start, having an energy bar and a coffee, or 1 banana and a coffee, and it's fine. So it depends on the duration of the race. If you go for an Ironman, it's different. If you go for a 50 k's road race, so it depends. And it depends also on your needs for sleep. Some people struggle pretty much to wake up very early. Other ones, it's not a problem. So you have to take all these parameters in consideration. The 5 ergogenic food that are science proven are the 5 following ones. So caffeine, which is said to delay fatigue. It's quite complex. There are many phenomena happening in our body after caffeine intake. Creatine, nitrates, beta-alanine, and bicarbonates. So that's the 5 ergogenic food that may help you being a better athlete and have better performances. And we will see how quickly that's not the main focus. But in 2019, the World Athletics Federation has had a statement about ergogenic food, and they said that caffeine can be obtained from real food and not only from supplements. So you may have benefits of having 2 or 3, let's say 2 espresso before a race. You may also have benefit using them in your drink or in your bars or gels, because during the event it may also help. But definitely it should be tried before racing. So while training you should try it. If you are a good responder to caffeine or not, and we are all different. Second one is creatine. It can be used especially for sprint sports or high power sport like rugby, soccer, but even in short distance endurance events it can be helpful, because it will help your body to produce ATP each time you have to sprint. So for example, for soccer, for strikers, it's very important because they probably have 10, 20, 30 sprints to be done during the match, and creatine may help to recover between those sprints. Nitrates, it's mostly found in beetroot juice, but you may find them in vegetables like rockets, like greens, and nitrates will help your body to use oxygen, because it will create a vasoconstriction in your vessels, and it will help oxygen to go to the muscle cells. And last one, beta-alanine. I don't know it very well, but when we will discuss ergogenic food in the advanced nutrition course, we will probably have a focus on beta-alanine. And bicarbonate, which may help for high intensity exercise in order to buffer acidosis, which is created from high intensity sprint exercise, for example. So all these foods can be found either in real food or in supplements, and definitely it should be tried before using them during a competition. But there is a bit of science behind those supplements. So you can see that, for example, beetroot juice, when used during several days, so it's 7 days of supplementation, you can see it on the right, with beetroot juice or placebo, you can see that beetroot helped cyclists to produce more power. It's the left side of the graphic compared to placebo, and it also helped to have a better reaction time. So yeah, that's why many athletes are relying on beetroot juice before competition. The goals of nutrition during exercise. So like before, the main goal is to delay fatigue, to avoid bowel inconfort and digestive issues, and prepare recovery for the next days, which is very important for stage races or tournaments, because Tour de France riders, when they are doing the stage number 5, the day after they have stage number 6, and probably in the next day the first mountains. So when they race, they are still thinking to prepare their body and for the upcoming challenges that they will have to face. So how? Very simple. Hydrate yourself with medium high quantities, like 5 to 80 meals per hour, 800 meals per hour, that's the average. Eat between 50 and 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour, so that's more complex to achieve, and we're going to discuss that. But there are lots of controversies right now between the pro-carbs and the anti-carbs. So, yes, at this time, science says that for the majority of athletes, if you are trained for that, having a bigger amount of carbs during exercise is probably the best strategy if you want to go fast. If your goal is just to finish, you may not need to eat such amounts of carbs. But if you want to be fast, produce power, you probably need to eat more carbs and to train for that. Train your bowel to process 60, 70, 80 grams per hour of carbs during exercise. And of course, during exercise, you should also avoid fat rich foods and big quantities, because the more you eat on the bike or while running or while swimming or while rowing, I don't know, the more difficult it's going to be to do at the same time digest the food and produce power with your muscles. It's two things completely different, and the blood flux, the blood volume will go during exercise to your muscles, to your skin, to your brain, and not to your bowel. Okay? So that's why it's so difficult to exercise and to do a proper session when you are currently digesting the last meal. We have all experienced that, going for training without finishing the digestion, and it's quite difficult to manage. But we are all different. For some athletes it's easy, for some athletes it's absolutely not possible to digest while exercising. One statistics, it's just a correlation, so it's not, there is no causality link between the amount of carbs that is used during Ironman Hawaii 2009 and the final results. But as you can see on this graphic, first there is a wide range of carbs intake at Ironman Hawaii 2009, but there is also a correlation between the higher carbs intakes and time. So it means that for athletes, being able to process high amount of carbs during the competition was quite successful. Okay, so that's just a correlation, but you can see for some athletes it was the amount of grams per hour was around less than 30. So 30 grams, it's barely an energy bar or gel per hour. And for the ones, it was around 120, which means probably one bottle of energy drink plus, let's say, 2 or 3 bars of gels per hour. And in order to being able to process those amounts, you definitely need to train for that. Elite cycling, elite triathlons at this time shows us that for the fastest athletes, eating lots of carbs during competition is key. That helps to make the difference in the Alps for Tour de France, or in Hawaii for winning the race or finishing top 10. For average riders, I just had a long debriefing with one of my athletes who raced Kona for the 4th time, and he was a little bit less trained. He struggled a little bit, and in the end, the conclusion of our talk was that for him, finishing in 14 hours, probably he ate too much carbs, and going that slow for him, because he has PR 11 hours, going that slow 14 hours and eating that much was not good. So I think there there is not only one solution. There are many options regarding your training level, your fitness, the goal you want to achieve, the goals you have, the further goal you have after the race. So it's quite complex. But in the end, if I had to resume, I would say that if you want to be very fast, beat your peer for a marathon, for a triathlon, you probably need to train your bowel to process bigger amounts of carbs while during the race. So there are currently that's the last food recommendation regarding the duration of your race or your training. Let's say intense training. So if your race is less than 1 hour, there are studies that show that the simple fact of doing what is called mouth rinse with a sweet drink is enough to have to enhance your performances. So you don't need to swallow the energy drink. Just doing mouth rinse with a sweet drink may help. But if you go for longer exercise, let's say less than 2 hours, you probably need to go to 30 grams per hour of carbs. So it can be energy drink or water plus gels or bars or dried fruits. But if you go for very long exercise, more than 3 hours, you probably need to go for 60 to more carbs per hour. And as I said last time, you may know that Kilian Jornet, this very successful runner, won Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. So it's 20 hours of running in the mountains around Mont Blanc in France, Mont Blanc, Italy, and Switzerland, of course. And so he beat the record. He won the race again, and it was quite a challenge because he had the competitors and they raced together for many hours. But in the end, he was able to push and win the race. And his conclusion was that ultra running was a challenge, mostly an eating challenge while you are running in cool place with other nice people. So that's my conviction. The more I coach, the more I read scientific studies, the more I think that successful athletes have the ability to process huge amounts of food and carbs while racing, and on the opposite, less successful runners and athletes don't have that capacity because they struggle more, they have bowel issues, they have digestive problems, nausea, many issues. But it looks like successful runners, for example, are able to eat what other runners can do. So that's a few examples. So you are on the left side, you have a very nice banana rack for your next bike ride. So actually I found it on eBay, so you may be able to buy it. And on the right side, it's before a triathlon race, with athletes sometimes having those racks of gels. Is it really necessary to go for such strategy? Last slide for during exercise nutrition. Caffeine is probably the most interesting complement while racing or while exercising, because it will help with muscle oxygenation. It will probably delay and reduce the moment fatigue appears and make you slow down. And this study published in 2013 shows that there is no real difference between real coffee and caffeine powder. But both of them, in a study done with cyclists, 8 trained male cyclists doing a time trial, it shows that caffeine and coffee gave better results than placebo and decaffeinated coffee. So there are now hundreds of studies that shows that for the majority of athletes, having coffee before the race and caffeine-enriched products during the race may help to increase a little bit performances. And whatever, even if you are a big coffee drinker, you still benefit. The last studies I've seen show that you may also benefit from that. If you're a non-caffeine drinker, you may train a little bit because caffeine may produce side effects like dehydration, like tremor. So you probably need to train a little bit for that. But that's the most interesting ergogenic food. And then from that we go to the last part after exercise. So when you do an exhausting exercise, your body is completely perturbated. So you are dehydrated, you are probably experiencing hypothermia, hypoglycemia, low glycogen, impaired immune system. Also, you may experience acidosis in your body, especially in your muscles, if you finish at the sprint with the sprints. And endotoxin intoxication. I won't go deep in with endotoxin because it's quite complex, but it's related to bowel permeability after exercise. And of course catabolism, because you produce lots of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and all these phenomena combined create catabolism. So you are currently losing some muscle fibers, amino acids, and your body needs to rebuild itself after an exhausting exercise. So there is, that's my own timetable for after exercise, so you may take a picture or take notes, but I suggest this timing after a long race. First, for the first 30 to 45 minutes, having mostly focusing on rehydration with water, with fruit juice, with recovery mix. That's the best. Going to liquid foods is probably the best. So it's easy to digest. It doesn't create bowel digestive energy expenditure, and it will help to rehydrate and to make up the level regarding the glycemia. From that, you can have a light meal. It can be a smoothie, it can be fruits, it can be a small sandwich, and of course still hydrating yourself with water. And then from that you will have your first meal, so you go to more complex and solid food. So it can be a soup or salad in order to have minerals, water, vitamins, but having a mix of proteins, carbs, and of course a dessert may help to recover. And in the evening you may also take benefit to have a protein-rich smoothie. Will probably make your body recover during the night, produce growth hormone, and and prepare for the next day. So that's a suggested timing. So on the opposite, sometimes I can see people finishing a race and go for solid, hard foods. So for example, a burger with wine, with many beers in the minutes just after a race. So it's not, I think for your bowel it's not very good, because your bowel, of course, unfortunately, we can't see what's happening in your bowel after a competition, but your bowel is probably experiencing many different things, from fatigue to dehydration to permeability, and you have to take care of your bowel. And I remember doing a race in my hometown in France, in Nice, and this race was a 25k running race, starting from 800 meters, going to 2,800 meters. So 2,000 k's of elevation in 25 k's. So super hard, reaching the highest route in Europe, the Col de la Bonnette. And I remember after the finish line, there was a very nice buffet with many things, from pizza, quiche to many different things. So you finish completely exhausted because it's high altitude. You run for most people 3 or 4 hours climbing, and from that, just after the finish line, you go on quiche, pizza, and solid food like that. That's not really good. So first, go for water, fruit juice, very simple things, and a few hours later, you can go for nicer things, nicer foods. Next year, and she has created a few years ago this nutrition product range for athletes, and she will give us a few information about the range.
Thank you, and thanks JB and Manu for allowing me to just introduce you to it. And I'm so glad for tonight, and especially that he mentioned the beetroot, because one of my, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my product. I'm passionate about nutrition and about eating real food, because there's so many supplements out there and so many information out there. And at the end of the day, if you can stay as close as possible to eating real food before you race or train, I believe that's better. With all the info that JB has given us about the digestion and stuff, I believe if you eat the correct food, it's just better, because there's so many hidden sugars and preservatives and stuff in so many of the supplements. So why I said I'm glad for the beetroot, my strap line is every ingredient has a reason. So when I design a recipe, I put in things for a reason. So the pink muesli is for that reason. I put beetroot in there, and it's a freeze-dried beetroot powder. So just to connect with what he said about racing and eating before training, that's why there's a wide range that I developed foods where if you just go on training or everyday eating the muesli that contains your nuts, your whole rolled oats, that's a low glycemic carbohydrate. There's nuts, there's coconut in there, some seeds, and then obviously the beetroot powder, and the health muesli has got some cinnamon. And cinnamon can assist you with your blood sugar level. That's also good for diabetes. And then there's the oats porridge. Some people like a hot breakfast. They like to cook their oats, or in winter time. That's for that. And then because of the fact that JB said it's difficult to digest and to not eat too high of fiber, I've done a couple of smoothies. And to stick to what I believe in, and also what JB mentioned, is yes, to eat just carbohydrates or just protein or just fats, that's not the answer. So what I've done with my breakfast is to put the carbohydrates as your main source, a complex carb. But for instance, in the smoothies, I would put a little bit of whey protein, a little bit of GMO-free soy milk powder, and then grounded up nuts. So the basis of one of the smoothies are just macadamia flour, basically. So it's very finely grounded. And then there's some chia seeds to fill you up again. And then the whey protein just to help transport the carbohydrates and to give you a stable blood sugar level. And a protein, if you add that to a carbohydrate, it actually brings the glycemic index down. So if you do eat a very high glycemic food, if you add some protein, it will actually bring the glycemic index down and make it more sustainable. And that's why it's so important, like you just said, if you take a high sugar carb 45 minutes before the race, you're going to get a blood sugar dip. But if you take that high glycemic carb and you add a protein in a digestible form in just a little bit, it will lower the glycemic index and will not give you that low dip. And then just for some of the people that's vegan or gluten intolerant, there's two mueslis that's completely with it's vegan and gluten free, and the one is with turmeric and cinnamon. Also, turmeric is again anti-inflammatory substance or a herb or spice, and then the other one is real cacao that's full of antioxidants and a little bit got the qualities of coffee. So yeah, and then this one, for instance, training and racing is oatmeal, and there's whey protein, chia seeds, some coconut, grounded coconut, and also grounded macadamia nuts, so that it's also for your digestion and not all the fiber or to pull a lot of blood from your legs and stuff. And now Paul has missed my whole talk, and he's the one that should keep this up. But anyway, so you're very welcome. If you want tonight, I brought this, but you're welcome to buy. Otherwise, it's available online and also in various of the spas and at our factory store in Montague Gardens.
Spas.
In some of the bigger spas, like Peripheral, Sea Point's got a very big, yeah. So, and you're welcome to contact me if you want to know where. But my main thing was to make it a balanced nutrition, but to also taste good and to give you sustained energy. So thanks for your time.